It's Ash from SuperVideos back for another video for The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at what went wrong in The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, how I would revamp the series to amp up the action and deepen the story. Let's tear apart the original and rebuild it from scratch. Stay tuned, we'll be right back to break this down. Alright, as always, before we dive into it, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. With that said, let's dive right into it. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go through a hypothetical scenario where we're going to rebuild the storyline from scratch. So I'm going to be telling you a summary of how I would have written each episode. Starting with episode 1, imagine this. Rick is stuck in CRM hell, but manages to fake his death in an attempt to escape, but it sadly flops. This would essentially be the same escape plan that we saw, where he managed to fake his death, but he was stopped by Pearl Thorne and forced to put an end to his escape plan. This episode will then peel back layers on Pearl's loyalty and shows us Okafor's mysterious agenda. This is where we see that conversation between Pearl, Okafor, and Rick, talking about the A's and the B's and the CRM's corrupt system, and how Rick and Pearl can help make it better. In this episode, Major General Beale will step in and he will have a conversation with Rick, just like we saw. But in addition to the stuff that they talked about, which they can still include, we could see Major General Beale talk to Rick about his escape plan. This escape plan connects directly to his cameo in the series finale of the original show. It would essentially be the same, but it would be more in-depth and less cryptic. The pilot in the post-credit talked about what someone told Rick, so they could explain that a little bit more and make it obvious that they were talking about Okafor and all of that. And this episode will wrap with Rick facing a dire decision, ultimately cutting off his hand. But instead of how they did it, it would be to save himself and a fellow prisoner. In the original, his plan was to cut off his own hand to escape, which was a ridiculous plan. But they could change that to make it so that he had to cut it to save himself and another prisoner. In the second episode, things will be quite different than what they actually gave us. In my version, in the second episode, Rick wakes up in a CRM medical ward, echoing his iconic awakening from the series pilot. And of course, here they could include that deleted scene. So as far as what this scene is, this takes place right after Rick actually chops off his own hand and everything when he's in the hospital being treated. But of course, in this scene, we have Rick and Okafor in a hospital. We flashback to Rick's arrival at CRM, revealing past interactions. We'll get that scene that we already got with Jadis explaining to Rick the CRM's massive 500-year plan. And when we flash forward in the current timeline with Rick in the hospital, we'll see Rick gaining a badass prosthetic arm. He's pulled deeper into CRM's military under Okafor's guidance, not just to reform, but to plot his next escape. This episode will end dramatically. Rick and Okafor in the helicopter, and their helicopter being attacked and being shot down by a mysterious group who will find out to be Michonne's group. This would of course be the same cliffhanger as the one we had, but for the first episode instead of the second episode. The second episode will be similar to the original second episode. Here's where Michonne's journey to find Rick kicks off. She discovers clues Rick left behind, like the phone with the drawing of Judith and Michonne and his boots. So instead of what they did, they could actually flashback a little bit more just to show us a bit more of what went down. They could backtrack, sort of thing. But it won't just be the stuff that we saw on the original show. They could add in additional stuff that we didn't see, like a notebook, for example, with a written quote from none other than Okafor. Now, you may be asking, what's the point of that? We'll get to that. But it could be something inspiring. So it's something that directly links to Okafor, who we now know and recognize, but we wouldn't have back then. As she follows Rick's trail, she'll come across the same group that we already saw with Nat and everyone. And then as their journey continues, we see a CRM helicopter attack the group and kill them all except Michonne and Nat. So this is essentially what we already got. Here they can do a bit of clever fake out. Through flashbacks, we could see Okafor asking for help from Rick, dealing with an incoming threat, making the audience think that this threat is the attack on Michonne's group, but it is unrelated in reality. They tried to do that, but it was so subtle that it went above everyone's heads. So a more obvious and in-your-face version would definitely be more impactful. And then, of course, we get the reveal that Rick was not actually involved with attacking Michonne's group, as we get the reveal that it was Michonne and Nat who attacked Rick and Okafor's helicopters. And then, of course, we'll get the same thing where Okafor dies, but maybe instead of a shock value death as soon as the attack happens, it could be a more gradual death that is more impactful. And his last words to Rick could echo the quote that Michonne found on that notebook. In the 4th episode, we'll see Michonne and Rick's reunion, just like we saw in the 2nd episode, which is explosive, literally, because of course, like it did in the original, it starts with a fierce gunfight. But amidst the chaos, Nat dies, like it happened in the original. And Rick quickly updates Michonne on her new undercover role and that they must get back to the CRM. Again, the same thing that we already got. When Michonne first comes to CR though, they should show more flashbacks of Rick at the CRM early on to mirror their introduction to the Civic Republic. They tried that, but it didn't quite work. That could further connect the past to the present. This episode will climax with Jadis confronting Rick about Michonne's unexpected visit, creating a suspenseful standoff. This is essentially the same cliffhanger from, I think, the 2nd episode. In the 5th episode, we'll see Rick threatened by Jadis, and we'll see Jadis reveal the documents that she has, or the dossier, that will have CRM soldiers kill every survivor at Alexandria within hours, same as the original. But what would be different is that Rick convinces Michonne to return to Alexandria and tells her about Jadis' threat, something that she didn't do in the original. Here is another difference. Instead of what they actually did in the original, what they could do is have CRM soldiers accompany Michonne and Rick, and they can have them drop her off at a remote area so that she doesn't know where CR is and can't get back. But they could have a storm that causes the helicopter to crash. But Rick and Michonne wouldn't jump off the helicopter like the original. They would just survive the helicopter crash. But this creates an opportunity for them. They orchestrate a dramatic escape. They fake their deaths using bodies resembling themselves, something that Rick tried to do in this version and of course in the original, and something that Rick was gonna do for Michonne in the original to trick the CRM. But their escape is hindered by a rogue team that slows them down. This is essentially what they did, but they did it in a very, very clunky way. So a more polished version of this would work very well. But this leads to a tense showdown with Jadis at the very end of the episode. In the 6th episode, and the 6th episode wouldn't be the finale like the original. This version would be 10 episodes long, and you'll see why 10 episodes works. But in this 6th episode, as Rick and Michonne navigate the aftermath of their escape, they're relentlessly pursued by Jadis, like we saw in the original. But they could have the flashbacks between Jadis and Gabriel reveal more details to us. It was great to see Gabe back and the interaction and the flashback, but they could have had it mean more. They could have had it connect the dots a bit more as far as what we're dealing with in the current timeline. And this episode will end with Jadis' death and confessing about where the documents are hidden back at the CRM. So this is essentially the same. In the 7th episode, we delve deeper into Beale's backstory, something that they skipped entirely, and they just gave it to us through conversation with Rick. This could showcase his rise during the early days of the outbreak and his strategic decisions that led to the formation of the CRM. It ends with Beale, now the leader of CRM, meeting Rick for a crucial briefing, the echelon briefing. This is, of course, a flash forward. In the 8th episode, we'll get another flashback with an insight into the events of World Beyond. In this episode, Beale sends Jadis to deal with Campus Colony of Omaha. We see things that happened from his perspective, with Jadis radioing in to provide updates. We also see how Beale responds to his son being kidnapped back at the campus colony, which we of course saw in World Beyond. This episode ends with Beale right about to leave to go after his son, but Jadis calls and says everything is dealt with. And then someone knocks. We think it's Rick, and this connects to the previous episode, but of course the timelines won't match. But who will be knocking? It would be none other than Lance Hornsby from the Commonwealth. There's a brief exchange which reveals that CRM was in fact working with Commonwealth. Beale sends Lance back and says he'll be in touch and to send his regards to Pamela Milton. Essentially what it means is that Beale is gonna get rid of them. This of course never happened, but it would show that Beale was planning that. And this would remove some of the plot holes that we had as far as the whole CRM Commonwealth relationship. In the 9th episode, Rick and Michonne sneak back into the CRM to get Jadis's documents. They discover Jadis's hidden reports and learn of plans against other communities. The episode includes Rick and Beale's echelon briefing and ends on a knife edge with Beale demanding Rick's loyalty at sword point. Rick's decision is left as a cliffhanger, so this is essentially 90% of the finale. But what they could do is add a post-credit scene here in this episode. This of course is the lead up to the finale. So what would the post-credit scene be? In this post-credit scene, we'll see Morgan. He'll go to Alexandria and finds out that Rick is gone. We'll see Carol, who'll tell Morgan that he's dead as far as they know, but Daryl is out there looking for him. And we can get something along the lines of Morgan saying that he wants to keep looking for him just like Daryl. Then in the series finale, which includes most of the events of the actual finale, but it happens in a slightly different way, and it happens a few episodes after the placement of the original. But what we'll see is Rick challenging Beale, leading to a deadly confrontation which ends with Beale's death, just like we saw. Rick and Michonne blow up the compound, which is the CRM headquarters, where all the CRM elites and leaders are at the moment. As the CRM headquarters crumbles, Rick and Michonne make a daring escape, getting away on a helicopter piloted by Rick. It'll be slightly similar to what we actually saw in the original, but it'll be more realistic than the original. Next, Rick and Michonne return to Alexandria. They find out that it's a Commonwealth outpost. They get introduced to Commonwealth, go there, and Rick and Michonne reunite with their children Judith and RJ, and also Ezekiel and Morgan. You can have Aaron there too, just for the fun of it, because of course both Aaron and Rick would be missing a hand. But of course, unlike the original, this reunion is not quite as forced and it's more rewarding, and it includes more of the characters we wanted to see in that reunion. But that's pretty much everything as far as my version of The Ones Who Live. What do you think? Would these changes have made The Walking Dead The Ones Who Live more engaging, or do you see flaws in my version? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let me know your thoughts and opinions. And if you're up to it, give me your version of how you would have liked the series to go. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.